Hello, I'm Andy Hodges and welcome. I'm here in Livingstone, Zambia at the Ad Hoc Expert Group convened under the auspices of United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA. And here in Livingstone, there are two thematic discussions. The first is leveraging renewable energy resources for a just energy transition in Southern Africa, exploring the options and challenges, and financing climate action and a just energy transition in Southern Africa, challenges and opportunities. And of course, it's being hosted by the government of Zambia. I am now joined by Tshililo Phume. He's Director of Africa Bilateral Economic Relations Trade Branch at South Africa's Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Tshililo, thank you for talking to me and welcome.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Tshililo, when we talk about bilateral economic relations, Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, it's probably something that it's not familiar to us in the rest of Africa. Can you explain exactly what your department does?
Thank you so much. I am from the trade branch, from the unit called Africa Bilateral Economic Relations. So what we do in that unit, we strengthen trade and investment relations between South Africa and the countries on the continent on a bilateral level. And we also make sure that we assist South African private sector that have got the capacity and the zeal to expand their footprints on the continent. We assist them in a way that we work together to navigate the regulatory and legal challenges that they will be facing on the markets that they are looking for these opportunities. That's where we work with our counterparts, let's say from here, Zambia. We work closely with our counterparts from the Ministry of Industry and Trade and see how we can assist to navigate those challenges that they might be facing.
So this is a good example of South African government working with the business to actually grow economically in the rest of Africa.
Indeed, because you will know that governments, they don't do business. What we do as governments, we create conducive environment for our South African private sector, or even the African private sector to make sure that they trade amongst themselves. We as governments, we make sure that the environment is conducive for them to do business.
So let's say, for example, I obviously want to break it down for my viewers. Let's say, for example, I'm a South African company. I want to do business in Mozambique, just for example. I can approach you and then you can help me navigate through the ministry in Mozambique, Ministry of Mozambique, and tell me some of the conditions, some things I need to do, and also help me if I go there, for example, to talk to the government there to set up all the necessary. Is that how it works in practice?
Yes, indeed. You should be a South African company, because we only assist companies that have got the capacity to increase outside South Africa. Companies that will increase the fiscals of the Republic through taxation and repatriation of funds back to the Republic.
Now, do you in your department of Trade, Industry and Competition, the trade branch, do you also look at the tariff structures that are happening between South Africa and other nations in Africa? Is that part of your brief as well?
Yeah, so what we do there, we have got another unit within the trade branch that will specifically deal with the tariffs, where they will negotiate through SACU. And you must remember that as South African government, we don't enter into any trade agreement with any nation in the world except through SACU. So let's say one other nation would like to enter into a trade agreement with South Africa, then they must approach SACU, because according to the new SACU agreement, no nation should go out and negotiate any trade agreement without the knowledge of other member states.
Makes sense. So let's assume that there is a trade relationship agreement put in place between yourself and another African country under SACU. Of course, after SACU has approved it, you then can use that as a template for how to do business with private sector, taking the private sector there. So it's a good template for business to start B2B sort of thing.
Yeah, it is, because what normally happens once the SACU Council of Ministers approves the negotiation of that particular trade agreement, then as member states we go and consult with business to make sure that whatever we're going to negotiate is within the interest of business. They will tell us about products that they think will require more access to other markets, and also about products that if we lower too much of the tariffs, will affect the local production. So we do that comprehensive.
Do you do any research to understand what investment opportunities are out there, or are you more driven by what business wants to do?
We do also invest, do the research from our side to see which are the high priority sectors that we can make inroads. Based on that research, we then go and consult business to see if what we have found out is within the...
I don't know if you can tell me this, but off the top of your head, what are the top 3 areas that you think are great opportunities for South African business to invest in?
I think we are doing quite well in the ICT, especially the telecoms. You see, MTN has got a serious inroads on the continent. It's one of the services that we are very much competitive on that. And also retail, even though on retail sector, we see some of the big retail companies de-investing in some of the markets on the continent. But that is due to the macroeconomic conditions, especially in those countries where there's a huge shortage of the forex, so they are unable to purchase some of the goods because the reserve banks of those countries will not.
What about renewables? I know we're here, of course, we're talking about just transition to renewable energy. And I see South African companies, particularly in this part of Southern Africa, are driving the supply of solar panels, the batteries, and a lot of it's coming out of South Africa.
Indeed, even in that sector, we are now currently seeing a lot of South African making inroads on the continent on the renewable energy. You recall that we had a serious energy challenge in South Africa that made us to build a capacity in that area. That's where we are even now able to expand these services outside South Africa.
I want to talk about 2 issues, if you don't mind. One, let's talk about SADC, the trade and investment that possibly is coming out of South Africa into the SADC region. And of course, then we can talk about the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Now, SADC, of course, is a little bit different because already being a block of nations, RBC, the trade agreements are already in place. So talk to me about the ease of doing investment and trade within SADC, and then we'll get into the African Continental Free.
South Africa trades, I think, 90% with the SADC member states because of the advantages of the SADC protocol on trade. We are in a free trade area. But with that being said, there are some challenges that most South African companies are facing. Mostly it will be your non-tariff barriers from other member states, where they will try to impose some of the restrictions on South African products into entering their market. And we are seeing most of those challenges of late, but we do have the dispute resolution mechanism that we normally utilize that in order to make sure that those challenges that South African private sector will be facing then will be registered there, and then they will be discussed during the meetings of these members.
I mean, I know what we see, particularly in Zimbabwe, is a lot of finished products coming out of South Africa, whether it be cooking oil or juices or whatever. There's a lot of finished products coming through. Is that sort of, do you regard that as investment, or is that just more just trade? That's more just trade, cross-border trade sort of thing, right?
So the South African government took a deliberate policy intervention when it comes to trade on the continent. We have got what we call the investment-led trade that we are imposing to other African countries, where as South African government, we encourage South African companies to go and invest in those markets where they can build their manufacturing plants with a view of selling those products back to South Africa, because we have seen a huge trade deficit between South Africa and countries on the continent. So we're trying to see how best we can decrease that deficit where it favors a lot of South African side.
But also gives jobs and employment in the other countries where your companies are setting up.
That's what
So it's a win-win.
Indeed, that's what we are trying to work closely with these other African states to resolve the triple challenge that we all African countries are facing, which are poverty, inequality, and unemployment. So by that way, we encourage South African companies to invest on the other parties' market. We are trying to resolve those. Even though our trade basket with these other African countries, it's the high value manufactured products that we send to these other African countries, where most of them will be coming from outside the continent. So in order to promote made in Africa goods and also to increase the intra-Africa trade, we see this as a good.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I look at inter-African trade, even within SADC, it's below 5 to 7%. In Africa, it's about 14%. So in a way, this is the South African government's deliberate strategy to not just boost trade from private sector, but also boost the trade that you're doing between yourself and the rest of Africa.
Yeah. So we have a policy from the South African government. It's on a developmental approach, where we look into the market integration approach and also the development of industrial and infrastructure projects, where as South African government will assist. Let's say there's a construction of a big dam in DRC, then we will assist in terms of providing finance from our development finance institutions, like your IDC, the Industrial Development Corporation, or DBSA, the Development Bank of Southern Africa, and also our ECIC, the Export Credit Insurance Corporation, that will reinsurance sort of product.
But it's all done on a commercial, well, when I say it's development aid, but it's on a commercial basis because there's offtake agreements and so forth. There's an aid as you would define it.
So where we will then assist by making sure that the products and services are acquired from the South African side in order to execute that particular project.
All right, so that's SADC. Now let's talk about the African Continental Free Trade Area. That was been in place since, the 1st of January 2020. I think a lot of countries are starting to trade underneath, and I believe South Africa is one of the pilot countries that started trading underneath it. I think Zimbabwe yet hasn't really gone into it. A lot of Southern African countries haven't really started utilizing Africa as they should do. Talk to me about Africa and your views on what you think that may do for trade and investment from South Africa out for your nation.
When the SADC ministers of trade gave a provision for the SADC, the SACU member states to be part of the FCFTA, we, from the South African side, after the deposit of those tariff concessions to the AFCFTA, we did a massive outreach program where we went out to all 9 provinces, where we met with the private sector, women and youth-owned enterprises, and also industry association, in order to sensitize to them the benefits and opportunities derived under trading the AFCFTA. We had a massive turnout from those stakeholders and companies. And what we found out that they were not aware of this type of opportunities. So it was a very good outreach.
How long ago was this?
It was last year.
Shows you though,
Yeah.
the communication level among
we started last year in May until August last year, in preparation for the launch of the FCFTA, where in January this year, 31st, we started trade under the FCFTA after we have fulfilled all the constitutional obligations required for a country to be party to that implementation plan.
Now, it's clear that your department doesn't only focus on big business, because obviously big business is only a small part of the economy, and you've still got, as you said, women, you've got the entrepreneurs, you've got SMEs, MSMEs. How do you then build their capacity to invest in other African countries? Because big business is a lot easier, I suppose. They've got all the lawyers and all the people, and they come to with you. But what about these groups or associations who really don't know the landscape in other countries, where they have the products, but they don't really know where to go? How do you help those sort of citizens and stuff?
Yeah, we have the Department of Small Business Development within the country that works closely with our Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, because from the DTIC's side, we will have some incentives that we will offer to these SMMEs in order to participate in the trade shows, trade exhibitions, pavilions. We have the schemes, the market intelligent assistance scheme that we utilize. That it's if you are a company, let's say we are going to Zambia for a trade mission, we have identified certain priority sectors that we want to focus on. We work with the provincial governments through the provincial promotion and investment agencies that are working with small businesses in those localities, so that we must not move and leave them behind. They must also participate in the mainstream of the economy.
You know, it's definitely 100%, because you may find that people in faraway provinces away from the center may not know about these things. So you need to bring them in. My final question to you, Calvin. South Africa, it appears, has taken or has made a deliberate strategic decision to boost investment into Africa and try and build that up, because already you are obviously trading with the rest of the world in various commodities and products, particularly in minerals. But now it's a time now that Africa started trading this up, and I think it's clear that the South African government has taken that decision.
Yes. So we believe that there's a lot that African countries can offer amongst themselves. So the main thing that we need to do as African countries is to make sure that we develop the regional value chains, where we will be able to see if a country like Cote d'Ivoire can produce some rubber on the development of automotive, just for an example, for tires. And then you get a country like Namibia, where they've got a huge deposit of lithium, and then we develop a capacity to produce the EV batteries. And then South Africa, we have over time develop the automotive sector. Then we can have Africa.
Because you're right, because you know, if we can all cooperate together, Zimbabwe can make a little piece, Zambia can make a little piece, Mozambique, and it can be assembled in South Africa and they ship somewhere. I mean, that way everyone benefits, and as well as investment as well, and trade.
Yeah. We have, just for an example, we have got ADPD, the Automotive Development Program, that supports that kind of value chain. For an example, currently Botswana produces harnesses in order to feed into the demand of the South African automotive sector. Lesotho, they produce leather seeds. They bring them to South Africa for the development of...
It makes sense, because if you have smaller countries, you're not going to set up a huge automobile plant there if there's already one in South Africa, but you can feed the component into that and then benefit from at least giving them some form of finished materials. Yeah. Calvin Phume, Director, Africa Bilateral Economic Relations, Trade Branch, Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Sir, thank you very much, Deep, for talking to me. Really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.